Hi, I'm Vic Chopra.
And I'm Spencer Oberg.
We are the co-founders of Unincarcerated Productions.
This is Unincarcerated, the podcast.
Here's our host, Cameron Collins.
You might be asking yourself right about now, what does it mean to be unincarcerated? Well, at Unincarcerated Productions, the belief is that it means to be liberated from imprisonment of any form and empowered to realize one's highest potential. On season 1 of Unincarcerated, the podcast, we are going to sit down with each member of the Unincarcerated team and learn about what brought them to being part of Unincarcerated Productions and where they see Unincarcerated going. This is Unincarcerated, the podcast, season 1. On this episode, we sit down with David Israel, strategist and producer for Unincarcerated. David is a successful entrepreneur who has launched several huge business endeavors that have taken over industries. He also had a 7-year legal battle and eventually served 4 years for a crime he didn't commit. But going to prison made him a better businessman and a better person. This is our interview. Hi, David. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure, Cameron. I've been looking forward to it.
We've talked about how Unincarcerated is about changing the stigma around people who've been previously incarcerated. And I know this is a big passion of yours. Why is that a passion of yours?
Well, because I lived it. But, look, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 19. I've been very successful, creating 5 different companies that made a splash in different categories and went on to be sold. And one of those companies, I was in the business lending, or I should say I was in the business of lending to businesses. And I started lending to jewelry stores and to coin shops and to, I guess, bullion dealers. And it led me into lending money to pawn shops. It was really this category of group where they couldn't really get typical financing because they didn't have credit. So when I started lending to pawn shops, I was like the pawn shop to the pawn shop. I didn't trust them, so I would take collateral. But it gave them the ability to make loans. And that's what usually stopped these folks from being successful, is they'd run out of money, they would stop loaning. I mean, it was just weird, right? And the more time I spent, and it wasn't a long time, it was about probably 9 months I was doing that above when I started lending to pawn shops. I started to realize, I was like, God, boy, it's terrible locations. The people, they treat their customers like crap. The hours are bad. The merchandising is horrible. And I wasn't interested. These were things that I recognized. I was like, boy, but some of these guys are making a fortune, right? But then I picked up a Fortune, funny, I didn't mean it that way, no pun intended. I picked up a Fortune magazine in 1992. And there was an article on a chain that went public called Cash America. And they were getting all these accolades in the market, and the stock was going haywire. But what they did is they were just acquiring mom and pop shops and then polishing them up, dressing them up, putting in managers with suits and ties, and creating a retail atmosphere, right? And then getting bank financing because they were a real business. They had financial managements and building this thing. And it was going crazy. So I found that intriguing. So I went down to Dallas and I checked it out, and I decided I was going to do that in Seattle. Just grow out faster than they were. That was kind of my thought process. I went into that business, was very successful. In 3 years, went from 1 single store to 13 stores, and I had the investors, all the leadership and founders of Starbucks and Costco were all my investors. But in my first year, or I shouldn't say first year, in our first 4 months of business and being in the pawn business, where I literally had no clue what I was doing. I mean, zero. I mean, people would come in with stuff, and I would go in the back room and call another pawn shop and pretend I was a customer and say, hey, how much would you loan me on a Sawzall? I had no idea. So turns out in our 3rd month of business, someone had sold us some merchandise that wasn't on the up and up. And 3 years later, he was in prison, and he was either getting charged with something else, possibly. I mean, he wasn't getting out anytime soon, but he was getting charged with additional. And he decided, hey, he used actually my company as a scapegoat. And the prosecutor bit into this. I mean, they bit hard. They gave him immunity. They gave his 2 partners immunity. They liked the big prize, right? They saw something where they could get the press and all this stuff. And then they ended up giving a guy that I brought in, an old friend of mine who I allowed to come in and work with me. They gave him immunity. He didn't have much to say, but he wasn't there to tell the truth. So that wasn't helpful. So I'm the only guy who was left standing. And you know what? It was horrible. Initially, they came to me and they said, hey, look, if we'll give you receiving stolen property. And 90 days. And I'm like, no, I mean, that's not going to work because that's not what I did. Not going to happen. So they decided to go ahead then and charge me with conspiracy, which is what they do. I mean, they up it up, they overcharge you. So you're just screwed, right? And if you don't have the money, you make deals. Or at least I think that's a lot of, I don't want to say that about all public defenders, but bottom line is the prosecutor doesn't want to go to court. It costs them money and it's time consuming. So they just try to beat you up with big charges. And the public defender's office is probably, they're overwhelmed a lot of the times, right? So people just end up making deals. Well, I wasn't going to do that. So I hired a pretty high power attorney. I didn't know, it's not like normal attorneys. You don't just pay by the month. I mean, it's everything up front because you may not be there to pay them later, right? So we had my wife and I had to make we gave him everything we had basically. And we were going to rush to trial because we found that the guy who implicated me had told someone that he was making this up to buy himself out of trouble. So we had this witness. It was his prison counselor, or it's kind of like your corrections, your CCO, your community corrections officers, but inside they manage your case. And he told the guy, I made this deal. I got out of all this trouble. This is the type of guy he was. So we got that guy and we wanted to rush to trial. And we got into court and we got there and, the judge, who was my judge for, 12, 13 years, I think. Like 13 years. Started with him. He said, okay, we're going to start the trial in a week or whatever, or 2 weeks, because I have a right to speedy trial and I didn't waive it. The prosecutor said, well, if that's the case, we're going to appeal that witness. So they asked for a recess. 3 hours later, they came back from the Court of Appeals and they were granted, they appealed and it put everything on hold. I didn't know for how long, but it ended up being 3 years. So I resigned from the company that I started that was super successful, winning all kinds of accolades in the press and the media. I mean, it's just, I'm becoming, I went from a guy that was basically grew up in a very poor environment to hanging out with the CEO of Costco and Starbucks and all their friends. And then poof, it was all gone in one day. And I resigned because I didn't want whatever I was going through to impact that company and their investment. So I ended up going home for 3 years. I started another company. With a friend, we co-founded a company called Driving Impressions, and we patented a system for truck side advertising that allowed vinyl banners to be tensioned on the side of trucks. And launched that. It was going crazy nationwide. In a couple of years, we were all over the place, even internationally. And then the ruling came back from the appellate court in 1999, early 99, it was January 99, January or February, said I could not have the witness because it could be hearsay or privileged information because of the guy's position. Okay, so now I have this conspiracy charge. They're saying, hey, you know what, if you like, we'll give you 2 years, plead guilty. No, that's not going to happen. So we geared up for trial. And trust me, this 3 years, my attorneys are working nonstop with investigators and they're preparing for a trial. So we went to trial and we had a 6-week trial. It ended. And then we had 2 weeks of jury deliberations. And boy, they came back. They called us down they said the jury was in. And let me stop by saying, I have never been arrested. I've never been booked. It was basically, it was weird. It came to me in the mail. I mean, I heard about it through because they reached out to me, but the actual charges came in the mail like a parking ticket, which is bizarre for conspiracy to commit robbery and everything, money, everything else under it, right? So kind of armed robbery, by the way. So it's kind of funny, but it kind of shows you what kind of acknowledges what the case really is. It was really about media and stuff like that. End of the day, we ended up they found me guilty, and these bailiffs come to grab me, and the judge says, hold on, man. He's not going anywhere. We're going to give him time to, kind of sort through get his family in order and his finances. And he asked my attorney how long I need. And my attorney said 60 days. The judge said, I'll give you 90 days. So that's April of 1999. I looked at it as I have 90 more days to be with my family. So I had young kids. My wife and I had been through a lot. I had to sell the truck side advertising thing because my partner didn't want to be a part of it if I was found guilty. And I didn't blame him, right? I mean, I don't want that to happen either. And I needed the funds to pay for more attorneys and investigators and wherever else. So we This is great. We go on. We're just started traveling around the state with the kids and spending a lot of quality time together, and of course thinking about how we're going to deal with my upcoming, whatever it is, 12 years in prison was what they were going to go after. So I think in like the third month, about 3 weeks before my sentencing hearing is coming, we're in a place called Yakima, Washington. It's really warm in the summer, and we're just hanging out at the pool, and I get a phone call from my attorney. And I answer, I go, hey, hello. I don't know what he wants. I mean, he's like, hey, are you sitting down? I go, well, I'm laying down. I'm in the sun. I said, but how much worse could things get? He goes, no. The guy that implicated you, who, by the way, couldn't testify because they tried to revoke his immunity. They said he was a liar. So never even testified. Now he's in prison. He's written a letter to the Seattle Times and to the judge and called my attorneys from prison, wanting to clear my name and tell them that he actually made it up, and the prosecutor knew he made it up, and he wanted to come forward and clear my name. I'm like, holy cow, it's over. I mean, done, finally. I mean, now he's going to tell the truth, and he's never testified, so thank God, right? So the judge ends up obviously pushing off my hearing and sets a hearing for this guy to come in and testify now another day, 90 days later. So it's now going to be September or something. I'm like, well, this is, either way, I'm doing good. I mean, I'm still out, I've been trying to enjoy it. We go into this hearing. It is so packed. We have to move to the largest courtroom in King County Courthouse. The media is there. It's just over. All my friends and family, it's overflowing. And they bring this guy in from prison in shackles with the orange suit, and they set him up on the stand and they swear him in. And the judge says to my attorney, Mr. Topel, he's your witness. And my attorney stands up to walk up to him, and the prosecutor stands up and says, excuse me, I'd like to suggest that Mr. Bryant might want to invoke his Fifth Amendment right. And everybody's like, what? And the judge is like, what? She's like, yeah, we're in appeals trying to revoke his immunity. If he's going to testify, even contrary to what he told us initially, we're going to use that against him. So his attorney stands up and says, yes, my client needs to invoke his Fifth Amendment right. And everybody's like, my attorney's walking in circles. The judge is shaking his head. And then the judge says, well, hold on. Someone wrote letters from that prison, and someone made phone calls from that prison, and they're recorded. He goes, so you know what we're going to do? We're just going to take a leave, not a day, not for a day. He goes, but we're going to have a handwriting analysis done on the letters. He says, and we'll have a voice recording thing reviewed and see who called his attorney, and then we'll decide. So about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks later, he reverses the verdicts. Well, I should say most of the verdicts. It could have been better, but he reversed most of the verdicts. And of course, prosecutor appealed. I knew from the last time it was going to be a while, so I was happy about that. And so I started a new company, and I couldn't get a job. That's the problem, right? So I actually got a job working. Well, it was on my own. I was started for a friend who had a property management company. He told me that these janitors they hire to clean the fitness centers at condos they come in for an hour and they're paid $300 a month. I'm like, oh shit, I can do that. So I started cleaning a fitness center at one of these condos, and they were so impressed. I'm pretty anal when it comes to cleaning. So I was probably the cleanest they ever saw it, right? They were like, hey, can he do this? Can he clean over here? And then the management company gave me 2 or 3 more, and I bought a van. And then they asked me, can you change light bulbs? I'm like, of course I can change light bulbs. Hey, can you fix this? I said, no. But I saw where it was going. And what happened was the management company, who my friend worked for, ended up offering me their entire portfolio, which was like 200 condominium units around the Northwest. So I hired and geared up, and I borrowed money to start getting trucks and stuff. Anyway, in 3 years, it went from me cleaning one place to I had 45 employees. We were doing about $6 million in revenue, and we were servicing 420 something facilities around the Northwest and doing all of so I had electrical, plumbing, construction. We just managed it was like a one-stop shop, but real professional. Uniformed guys, great customer service. So that's going well, but this is still the cloud is still hanging. The appellate court hasn't come back, but they did come back in June of 2003. And they ruled, they affirmed the judge's decision. But they did give the prosecutor the right to retry me. And they were going to retry me. And of course, I started reaching out to attorneys. It's $500,000 up front. It's the same old game, right? But boy, you'll win this time because now we have this guy. He's locked in. You have all those results. Well, the last time I was told it was a 98% chance I was going to win, and that didn't happen. So I was like, you know what? I can't do this to my family. I can't put us any more in debt or spend everything we have on something that's not a surety. You know what I mean? And now I got to sell another business on top of it that I built. And, and it's not easy. It's a lot of work. My wife and I went away, and I'm like, hon, I got to be done. I need to make a deal. I can't do this. I need to just go get it done and have it for sure be behind us, and not potentially 15 years or maybe I win. I mean, I just can't play this game. And we agreed we went away for like a weekend, and we agreed she was going to support that. We figured we're going to just focus on our kids and blah, 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 blah. So we get an attorney now, a different attorney in Seattle, because my attorney was from San Francisco. It didn't get along with anybody, which is another mistake. And they came back. Hey, yeah, 22 months, plead guilty. I said, no, I'm not going to plead guilty. I'll give you, which is like a no contest plea, which is in Washington is an Alford plea, but I won't do anything less than that. Not guilty. I said, guilty, not coming out of my mouth. Sorry. And they said, okay, Alford plea and 60 months. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I mean, it was important for them for me. They wanted to get that out of me, right? I mean, it was important for them to save face because their case was shit. I mean, the other guys got steamrolled. And I said no. So at the end of the day, I ended up taking an Alford plea. I went to prison for 4 years, and that was it. My wife and I had a plan: protect our kids, keep our family together. Whatever the phone calls, limit them, get them into private schools where they're not going to get attacked, by where they'll have some safety and security, and the support of all of our people. So, which we did. It was great. We had this huge community support. It was enormous. And my plan was, because all I've seen about prison is on TV, is I'm going to go and I'm not going to talk to any of that garbage, the lowlives, the idiots, the dopes that I don't need to socialize with, and I'll just do my thing and get through it and keep to myself. Well, it wasn't 2 days after being in the county jail where I had to turn myself into that I got put into a pod. And I have no idea. I mean, every time a door closed, but I was into some new thing. I didn't know what was next, right? I had just no clue other than, like I said, what I saw on TV. And guys, I kind of stood out, not intentionally, but I stood out. And there were guys this was in August of 2003. So they have, in the King County Jail, they have and I think it doesn't matter what time of the year, they have the air conditioning turned way up, because if you're cold, you're wrapping up and you're staying still most of the time rather than causing problems, right? So they like it when you're staying in a place, right? So I'm freezing my ass off. And I got guys giving me their blankets. I've got guys offering me help to show me how to use the payphone, to communicate with the staff. And I'm like, wow, these people are really nice, and telling me, don't talk to that guy, stay away from this guy, that officer, don't look at him. I mean, it's like, okay, they're really looking out for me. There was a lot of like humanity. I'm like, this is odd, And then I get moved to a different section because, I'm a Class A felon. So they now take me and move me into another thing just for a night. And they move me in with this guy. And as soon as I walk in, he was a bigger black guy. And he was yelling at a friend of his across the hall because it's a solitary confinement thing, And they throw me in. I'm like, hey, how's it going? He goes, sit down and shut the fuck up. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, okay, whatever. I didn't care. I mean, no problem. So I just got up on my bunk and sat there. And I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours later, he goes, what are you in for, man? He was like, what are you in for? I said, well, conspiracy to commit robbery. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah. And he goes like, how's that? So I start talking. He goes, well, what happened? I go, well, this guy named Vince Bryant. He goes, Vince Bryant? I go, yeah. He goes, I know Vince Bryant. He goes, that guy's a snitch. He goes, that guy makes up shit. I go, no. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, he got me in trouble and wall. I'm like, okay. So now he's explaining to me about this is how it happened. That guy's they'll be able to turn him, and he's a liar. I'm like, well, I told him the whole story. Ends up the next morning they take me and they shove me off to prison, right? Which is another thing. You walk in, I don't know what's going on. And of course, again, I'm thinking, now I'm in prison. It's going to be people, I got to stay away from garbage, right? Well, I just keep learning about the humanity, people helping me out, looking out for me, realizing that I've not been through this. I have no clue what to expect, And it's amazing. I mean, I want to tell you two stories about when I'm in this Shelton processing center. It's maximum security. And you really only get out of your cell for the 3 meals, to take a shower twice a week or 3 times a week.
Wow.
And then to go outside if it's not raining or foggy, right? So I finally get put into a cell with one person because I was in a cell with like 4 people. I'm sleeping on the floor. And they took care of me. Trust me. I mean, they were like getting me cups of coffee. I mean, I had no idea. So I started jogging because I'm like to stay fit, and I'm a routine kind of a guy. And I started jogging. I would roll my jumpsuit up, and it was hot out, so I'd roll it down and tie it around. So it was kind of turned into shorts, right? And after about, it started raining. Even though it was August, it was late August, it started raining and the fog started coming because Shelton's out in the sound. And I couldn't call my wife every day because that's the only time you can use the phone is when you're out in the yard or the outside area. That's the only place there were phones. And I knew she would worry. And like 3 days had gone by and I'm like, boy, I don't know what to do. But they have this thing called the sergeant's crew there. And those are inmates that get put on, and they're out all the time because they're either mopping or they're running messages from one unit to the next or whatever it may be. They're like, they're like the assistants to the staff. There's this young black guy. He's obviously a gang banging guy. And he came to bring us our mail, I think, or something like that. And I said, hey, can I ask you a favor, man? He's like, what? I go, could you call my wife for me? He's like, what? I said, look, I know she's really worried. It's been 3 days. And I just want her to know that I'm okay. And he's like, you trust me to call your wife? I said, I'd appreciate it. I said, I just want you to call and let her know I'm okay. I'll give you my information so she'll accept the call. He said, okay, I'll do that for you. So he did it, and he would come back and tell me her message. It was weird because he'd have to come back and say, she wanted me to tell you that she misses you and she loves you and the kids are okay and they love you. I'm like, well, thank you. Well, you know what? The weather was bad for like a week, okay? So he was doing this almost every day for me. On like the last day of the week, I don't know what it was, 6 days, he comes back and he goes, hey, man, I want you to know that I talked to the sergeant and I told him the situation and he's going to let you have my job. I said, are you moving on? He goes, no. He goes, but you need to talk to your family. He goes, I don't have a family. I said, you're going to go back into being in the cell 23 hours a day? He goes, it's okay, man. He goes, you need to talk to your family. He goes, I can't. And I'm like, this is like, really hit me. I'm like, I can't believe this kid, right, who's probably grew up in a very mean environment, right, on the streets, just gave up his freedom, which I know it sounds weird, but being out of his cell 14 hours a day to now putting himself so I could talk to my family, right? And that was like, I was like, this was really a sign of humanity. Then over the next 30 days I'm there, the white supremacists or the neo-Nazis started singing that they were going to get the Jew and they were going to stab the Jew and kill the Jew. And they would actually start singing behind me in line for if they were like 3, well, it doesn't matter where they were, but they'd be singing. And it was weird. It was like, we're going to kill the Jew. We're going to kill the, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, I'm just trying to get on with my life, man. I'm not saying it to anybody. I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. Well, it went on for like 2 weeks, and one of the guys who I actually employ now, who became my first friend in prison, Milo, was like, man, they're going to shank you at here and they're going to shank you out at the yard. And I'm like, okay. And I just got sick of listening to all the bullshit. So one day I'm out jogging and I see the kind of like the head guy. He's in the middle of the yard with a bunch of dudes around him. It's hot out. He's got a swastika tattoo this big on his chest, right? I'm like, fuck it. I stopped running and I walked into the middle and I walked up to him and I said, hey, hi. I said, David Israel. He goes, yeah. I said, well, I heard you guys wanted to stab me or beat me up or something. I said, can we just go around over there, and just get it over with? He goes, what do you mean? I said, I just want to get over it. I said, I keep hearing about it. I said, I'm here to do my time. I want to get back to my family. I said, I just want to get this over with. He goes, and you're not going to say shit to anybody. I said, no, I just want it done. I said, I can't take hearing about it. I just figured I'll hit the nail on the head. He goes, and you're not going to fight back? I said, dude, I just want you to do what you need to do. He goes, I respect that. He goes, you know what, man? He goes, I'm going to call dudes off. He goes, don't worry about it. And I'm like, really? He goes, I respect what you just told me. I'm like, okay. I said, well, I respect that. And I went off and I'm like, I didn't know what to think. The next morning at breakfast, I'm just known for, I get my tray, I sit down, I trade all my carbohydrates for protein, right? So I'll say, who wants to trade this for that? The next morning, about 3 of these neo-Nazi guys bring me their hard-boiled eggs and just put it on the table. And I'm like, wow, the lesson was it's about respect, right? And kind of holding your own. That message stuck with me forever. I'm learning how to deal with people. I'm learning what's important in life, respect and honor, and how you treat people. I'm learning there's a lot of humanity. And I'm learning like these guys are not the scum of the earth morons, dingbats that I thought. And when I got to my facility in Monroe, I started meeting guys. And they're smart and they're helpful. And I'm experiencing the same thing, the kindness and humanity. Of course, I'm seeing all the other shit too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's there. And there's a place that's why there is a need for prisons, but not as big of a need as what we think. I start meeting guys and they're telling me their stories and I get out, I try to get on the right track. Oh boy, they take away my license because I missed a payment and now I lose my job because I can't get to it. Well, they made my payments so high, I couldn't even afford to work. Or, gee, they wouldn't let me see my kids but a lot of things were, when they made it so difficult that I couldn't work, I just had to go back to do what I do because that's the only way I could get money. And you go back to do what you do and you end up back in prison. So that really bothered me. And I started teaching business classes in my first place. Then I got to minimum security. And again, I'm meeting more guys, but now you're seeing them start to cycle, right? Because it's minimum security. You see a guy that's like stellar, super sharp, really committed to be with his family or have a good life and not come back. And all of a sudden, 7 months later, he's back. And you're like, what happened? Well, this guy wouldn't let me do this. And then it caused me to lose my job or something. Just something simple would cause them to stumble or prevent them from being successful in what they wanted to do. And I think not as much anymore because DOC is changing, but back then it was more prevalent that they kind of like to see you fail. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They love sticking the stick into your spokes. And like I said, things have changed a lot in the 12 years that I've been back, but they're still the bad guys on both sides. Okay. I mean, people are people. Anyway, in my last 6 months in minimum security, some guys made some popcorn concoction. They took microwave popcorn. It's stuff they got off the store. You could buy candy and popcorn and top ramen and all kind of peanut butter. So these guys would take microwave popcorn, pop in the microwave, take a big garbage bag, and then they would melt caramel, pour it in there. Or excuse me, first they would mix in peanut butter, pour it in there, and then they would mix it up with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, M&Ms, and chopped up Rocky Road candy bar. And they mix it all up, and then they would trade it out to guys in smaller bags. And I didn't try it for a while because, again, I stuck to a diet, and if it wasn't on my day, I wouldn't eat it. So one day I did eat it, and I'm sitting on my bed, and I'm like, holy shit, this is a business, And I was really determined to create a business while I was there, to really throw it in that prosecutor's face, that I wasn't going to go away and come back without something to make her sorry. And I decided that was a business. I had my friends on the outside send me stuff on the popcorn category, read up on it. I wrote a short business plan while I was there. I came home and, once I got my act together, about 2 years later, I just started making that concoction and showing it to my friends, and they were going nuts. So I started packaging it, and I took it to a grocery store near my house, and I said, hey, try this stuff. Let me know what you think. And I had it in some really cool bags, with a sticker on it. I decided to launch this called the Original Big House.
That's amazing.
And nobody knew what it was, but I took it to this grocery store, and the guy called me, and I went back like 2 weeks later, and he goes, hey, we're going to put this on the shelf. I said, oh, great. I'll make it. I'll give it to you. And if you sell it, you can pay me. He goes, no. We're going to pay you. He goes, we love this stuff. So it started selling there, and then it started selling throughout that chain. And then I started bringing in other flavors. And I looked at the shelf. It's doing pretty good. I mean, it's doing well, but I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm looking at the stuff next to me on the shelf, the butterscotch toffee, the whatever, the caramel corn with something or other flavor in it. And I'm like, I kind of, even though this is a much higher quality and really unique and has a story behind it, it's kind of just blends in with everything else. So I'm like, I got to do something more unique if I'm going to be successful here. And I talked to my wife, and she's like, well, do the top trending flavors that's available today, and came up with white truffle and chocolate salted caramel. So now I'm in business about 3 months, and I put those on the shelf, and they start doing really well. I'm like, okay, I mean, really well, by the way. I mean, like through the roof. I mean, they are the highest quality, amazing products. And I get a little kitchen now to cook in. It's about 1,200 square feet in the back of some building. I said, well, if I'm going to do well, I need to have someone with food experience here because I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I hired a woman who used to work at Starbucks and had food experience. And she's like, day one, she's like, your white truffle is unbelievable. And she goes, Oprah's a fan of white truffle. I'm like, huh. I said, well, I'm going to send some back to a magazine then. And I shipped some back to a magazine. And 5 days later, on a Friday afternoon, I get a phone call. And I'm like, literally, it's like 3:00 our time in Seattle. And I'm like, Pop Gourmet. She goes, hi, this is, and I wish I should remember her name, but I can't. She goes, this is, I forget, Sydney at O Magazine in New York. I go, oh, yeah, hi. And she goes, Oprah loves your product. And we have a company meeting tomorrow, our office meeting tomorrow. I go, Saturday, yeah. She goes, we'd like 5 cases of your white truffle popcorn shipped overnight by tomorrow. She goes, can you do that? I'm like, sure. I mean, I know I have like until 5 to get to Federal Express. We made 5 cases, especially for her, shipped it. She had it the next day. She ordered a few more times to like her LA office, to her home in Santa Barbara. And then she put us in her magazine 3 months later as her favorite thing. And things kind of just took off. And it went fast. And then I started getting all types of media, and she started giving me media because I had to tell her editor the story, and he got all jazzed up, and they were excited. So I started getting tons of media and all kinds of attention, and we just grew really fast. So now I'm building production. So I hired my first cellmate. I gave him a job, but it became a big part of my mission because I saw too many people. The stigma, they couldn't get a job, or they get a job and whoever their employer was couldn't work with them because of what DOC was causing the trouble. It was too many hoops or too many missed days or whatever it may be, right? So I'm like, I'm going to start giving guys opportunities. And I don't know, we probably hired, because at one time we had 120 employees with all of our shifts in our production facility. But there's a lot of transition there, especially in production. So I probably hired 130, 140 guys that came through. And look, either they would want to stick around or they just worked there when they were in work release so they could get us, kind of a step off the ground into where they were going. But it was really important, for a long story, I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
That I learned that they were no different than me. Some were victims of environment. I mean, I met kids who would tell me, look, I never wanted to be in this, but my mom, when I was 9, would send me down to steal stuff from the grocery store or to steal tennis shoes so I had shoes or clothes. He goes, it's just how I was taught, and I don't want to be that, but it's hard to get out of it. So I really wanted to change that. And it's funny, after my 3rd year in business, the Department of Corrections reached out to me and asked for a meeting. And the assistant superintendent and 3 other executives came down to my production facility, and we sat in my conference room. I didn't ask them what they wanted. And everybody's like, how you didn't ask? I'm like, no, someone's asked me to meet. I'm like, I'll meet, right? So they're like, look, we're really encouraged about what you're doing. How can we do better? How can we work together, right? Can you speak on our behalf to show that there's ways to help these people? I was really impressed. They actually took me to a couple of their prisons and showed me what they were trying to do to teach people, to give them skills and wanted my input. I'm like, this is amazing, And I'll never forget one of the guys, an old school guy who started out as a guard. Now I forgot what he did, but he was pretty high up. He's like number 4 guy there. He goes, so we have to help the offenders. We got to do this for the offenders. I said, you want to know the first thing you can do for them? I said, what's that? Or he said, what's that? I go, stop calling them offenders. He goes, why? I said, when you talk to an employer and you say, I would like you to speak to our offender, or I'm sending you an offender. I mean, the picture that goes in their head, I said, call them formerly incarcerated, call them someone re-entering society, call them a felon, call them an ex-con. But offender it's scary kind of, right? And it's just trying to teach these people the small, simple things can make a big difference. Anyway, I started speaking nationally with the guys at Richard Branson at Virgin and Dave's Killer Bread. Dave got in a little trouble again. So Dave's Killer Bread Foundation asked me to come in and start talking on Dave's Killer Bread's behalf. And it just became part of my mission, Cameron. And I know not every person that's incarcerated can be changed, but a significant amount, given the opportunity, either want to or will. You know, when I went back to speak, where I met Spencer, there was a guy in the back of the room who said they kind of like his friends convinced him to come and listen to me in this executive talk. He's like, fine, I'll go, but I'm planning how to go. He said, I'm in my mind, I'm trying to figure out how not to get caught the next time I go do what I do. He said, so at the end of our talk, he raised his hand. He goes, you know, my friends convinced me to come. I was like, well, I'm going to go because just to make them happy. He goes, but I'm going to figure out how to do what I do better. He goes, but you guys have shown me I have a different choice, which I didn't think I had. Maybe I don't have to go back and do what I do.
Wow.
And that was a message, right?
Yeah.
If just people know that there's hope or opportunity, it changes their lives. So yeah, I hired a lot of folks. Milo, my first friend, worked for me at POP. Annie's worked for me here. He's here now. I found that formerly incarcerated people appreciate and have more gratitude and more committed and are less work and more trustworthy than most of high-level executives that I've hired or any employee that I've hired. They appreciate the opportunity. They want to give back. They want to be a part, and their gratitude is what look. You know what? It really makes it worthwhile. So we could do a lot for society by doing simple things and just giving people the opportunity. Stigma, well, it doesn't belong on a lot of people. I mean, sure, you have to have an eye open on the guys. There are guys that won't change. I guarantee it. They're not going to. And there's mental illness involved. And but we can help an enormous amount of people. I probably got there a long way. That's how I got to where I'm at.
So your message is so amazing, and you get it out there. But how do you get it to the masses on a scale where it becomes a conversation in people's kitchens, where they start changing their mind about people who've previously been incarcerated, so that they, you know, even I have conversations with my parents and I'm constantly re-educating them on stuff like this. And how do we get that out there into society so that the difference, while it's amazing and we need to make difference in everybody's life, but then everyone wants to make that difference.
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is a new trend and people are jumping on board. I mean, our governor is well behind it. I mean, he wrote me a letter to thank me for what I was doing. I didn't ask for it. I didn't know it was coming. A lot of celebrities are now getting involved. I think it's important to get the stories out there, right? And Spencer, you know, who was one of the founders of this, and I worked together. I gave him a job out of work release and found the best partner I've ever had. I mean, bar none. But I tried to start organizations where it wasn't just one organization. It was all of us working together and collaborating. There's power in numbers, not fighting for the dollars, and trying to offer services across the board as a team, as a collaboration to people coming into society, to speaking to society to help, you know, get the message out there. But then I had this idea of kind of like a Shark Tank for guys that were incarcerated, right? And getting attention to it. And I had a lot of, I had some pretty heavy hitters that were willing to get behind it, but I couldn't get the Department of Corrections to allow us to do what we need to do. I think we've made a lot of progress. I think media showing and telling real stories where people can connect, because look, people love, people watch, what's that, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette or whatever, all these different shows, right?
Yeah.
Something like this that's really real, where they can really see a real person, man, woman, whatever, wanting to do, that is formerly incarcerated, that maybe had a troubled past, maybe didn't, but had to go through the system, and show them as real people with real families. And it's changing them. Like, that's the stigma that I had in my mind from the movies, right? I mean, I was shocked, right? I mean, like I told you, I knew exactly what I was going to see, and I was dead wrong. Okay. I saw some of it, but it wasn't 100%. It was more like, I don't know, 45%, right? So I think that story has to be told. There has to be a connection. We have to keep doing what we're doing, getting the politicians. There's a ton of celebrities that are jumping on board, right? There's a ton of movies kind of out there about all the wrongdoings. We're starting to hold the police accountable, which is good. Okay, no more bullies. Nobody just power hungry, ruining people's lives because they can, or because you didn't respond to them the right way or whatever.
Yeah.
But now we have to kick it up a notch. We have to hold the prosecutors accountable.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let them do it because they can, or for political reasons, or to further their own career, so they could use it to become a judge or a more successful attorney on the outside. We can't allow the bullshit and the lies to happen anymore. Can't allow what happened to me happen. That woman should have never got away with it. You know, it's interesting, Cameron. When I was, again, at my last place I was at, the minimum security, they called me in for my intake. The sergeant in my unit and my custody unit supervisor. And I walk in, I'm scared to death, and they're going to evaluate, because you go through there every time you move. The sergeant goes, "So you're the man." I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, "We're reading your thing here." I go, "Yeah." I said, "Look, I'm just here to," he goes, "What a bunch of bullshit." He goes, "You didn't do any of this crap." I said, I go, "No, I didn't." He goes, "The custody unit supervisor says, 'Well, Mr. Israel, we're sorry.'" And I was like, I was almost taken to tears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I haven't had a sorry. Okay. They're like, "Look, we can't change anything. We don't believe what we're reading. We hear that you like are really, an inmate that just does everything right. We just want, we're going to do what we can for you, but we're sorry that you're here, that you're going through, and you and your family are going through what you're going through." And I walked out, and I felt like a load was taken off, and I just felt like I was deemed innocent, sort of, you know what I mean? And then when I had my popcorn company, this prosecutor who now is an investor I met with, and he reads my case, and he's like, "What a bunch of bullshit. I want to get you a pardon." I'm like, no, I don't need it. He goes, no. I'm friends with the prosecutor. I'm friends with the governor. He goes, "This is not a problem." And he goes, "I know the judge." I said, "No." I said, "Don't need it." I said, "I'm done. All right. It's behind me. It's not going to change anything for me. I mean, at the end of the day, what? I'm happy. It's part of who I am. Forget it. I don't need a pardon." He still, to this day, every time I meet with him, he's like, "I want to get you." I'm like, "Sorry," or "I wish I'd let me." At any rate, the judge, he ran into the judge at a club it's called Seattle Tennis Club, where they were both members. Mm-hmm. And the judge saw him on a TV show they did about me. And the judge said, "If you would you please have David get in contact with me? I'd like to meet with him." So the guy calls me, he goes, "Hey, Judge Mertel would like to know if you would consider meeting with him." I'm like, "Sure." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Well, I'm going to give you his phone number." So I call. This is weird, right? I mean, this is in 2015. I call the judge, and he answers the phone. I'm like, "Hello, Judge Mertel." I go, "This is David." "David, thank you for calling. Hey, listen, I really need to talk to you. Would you meet me for coffee next week?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Would you mind if I bring my wife?" He goes, "No, bring Julie. I'd like her to hear it too." I go, "Okay." We meet him at this coffee shop in his neighborhood. We walk up, he gives me a hug, gives Julie a hug. We sit down. He wants to know if we want anything. And we're sitting there in this little table outside. It's a nice day. He goes, "Look, I wanted to have this opportunity. Your case has haunted me, and I know you weren't guilty, and I trusted the jury system, and then there was nothing I could do." He goes, "And I want to apologize for whatever my actions did to cause you all this grief. And I'm doing really well right now. I mean, this is all the stuff with Oprah, the company's going haywire. It's international. I couldn't be happier. And I've built it off this platform that from prison. So I know the prosecutor's probably choking every time she sees me on TV or in a magazine or something, right? So I'm pretty content. And now I really feel justified that the judge is apologizing. And I said, "Judge, you don't owe me an apology." I said, had you done anything different, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I'm in a really good place. I have my wife, I have my family, I have a different perspective on life. I'm able to help people, and life's good. I said, I do appreciate this, but you don't. And he got a tear in his eye. He goes, I can't believe it. He goes, I hope you forgive. I said, you don't owe me an apology, but I do forgive you. I said, I'm glad that we're here. And I said, it couldn't mean anything more than what this is. We ended up going out with my wife and my kids and his wife for dinners. I mean, every quarter up until COVID, we were connecting. And again, that's better than a pardon. You know what I mean? To know that people were in your court and knew you were innocent, and just their hands were tied. I mean, the system sucks, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, once you're in, nobody can really undo it. And the prosecutors are not going to say we messed up. And by the way, we wasted $2 million of taxpayer money over the past 7 years. And we had the guy incarcerated, right? And now he's helping everybody. I mean, they couldn't win for shit. So, yep. I think it made me a better person in the process. It made me a better business person, because you don't sweat the small stuff anymore. When you're in prison, anything that's out of your control, you just got to go, oh, it's out of my control, so I'm not going to worry about it. What can you do, right? You can't sit there and let it kill you. So now as an entrepreneur, I'm like, shit happens. I'm like, oh, well, shit happens. What are you going to do? Let's move on. Let's fix it. Let's move on, right?
Yeah. You know, it's fascinating because I worked for a judge at the King County Courthouse summer of 2005, I believe it was.
Wow.
And I remember, a prosecutor bringing a case, and I won't get into the specifics on it, but in the end, it ruined this guy's life. If he was innocent and if he was guilty, he probably should have served more time than he got by pleading. And the prosecutor was like, yeah, it was 50-50. We didn't really know. And I don't know why you would bring a case that is 50-50. And why is that the way that our criminal justice system works? It doesn't seem it's worth it for people like you to have to go through what you went through.
Well, Cameron, you know it happens a lot.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I first got in the courtroom, as I'm going through that process up to trial, I'm learning this is not what you see on TV either. Mm-hmm. It's production, right? Yep. I mean, it's a fight for, hey, will you let us bring this in? Can we show that? We don't want them to be able to say this. I mean, it's a fight for your production, because you're going to present your production to a jury. And the other problem is, it's not innocent till proven guilty. It's guilty till proven innocent. And then even then, you're still kind of guilty because the prosecutor charged you. Yeah. So it's a shit story. It needs to be changed. It does. And it needs people that care to really change it, because we destroy a lot of people's lives, and a lot of seasoned criminals get away with a lot of shit because they know how the system works. So it's double-edged sword. We got to fix it, though. And I really want to see society understand who these people are. I guess all the people, right? But typically people that are formerly incarcerated, there's a lot of benefits, right? It's not just one person that we're helping. It's their family. It's taxpayer dollars. I mean, how much do we invest in trying to either throw them back in or manage them or destroy them or whatever? Look, those dollars can be applied to a lot of different better things in our community than just screwing around with people.
And probably better ways to help people too, who need help, who are in those ways in the system, rather than
put that money towards helping people with mental illness. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a huge crisis in our country. Yeah. And there's just so many benefits. And, obviously if we give people opportunities, crime rates go down. They don't need to go back and do what they used to do, right? There's so many benefits, but they have to be seen as real people first. Again, Dave's Killer Bread put on a thing, but it's weird. It was in accordance with this food show that I normally do. And I used to speak at it as an entrepreneur. But one year, Dave's Killer Bread was a sponsor. And they asked me to come speak to the audience, right? And I got there and I spoke to the audience. And they're thinking I'm speaking about what I'm doing here at Good Planet. It's last year. It's called Farm to Table or Farm to Label. I forget. Anyway, and it's a huge thing. And all the private equity comes in and all the food guys come in. So I'm on stage talking to this huge audience. And I said, but I'm not here to talk about me and my company. I said, I'm here on behalf of Dave's Killer Bread Foundation and what we do together. I said, as someone that's formerly incarcerated. And then you could see I walked off the stage and there's people, they're like, we had no clue. I mean, we're like, there is no way that guy was in prison, right? And I'm like, well, that's the message. It's not who you think, right? there's not one picture of one guy that you should, with a tattoo on his forehead, or the stigma's got to go. It could be anybody, right? So don't have that stigma. Know that I'm someone that went there. I came back. Yeah, I had a battle. I mean, it was not easy to start a company and raise capital being through what I went through, but I found people and it happened. So it's great to be able to tell those stories and let people know that it's not who you think all the time. And even the ones who you think, probably they're not who you think they are.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, I want to ask you one more question and to finish us off here, and it's going to be more personal, but I want to know, after you had served your time and you're stepping out of prison, what was it like when you got to see your wife and kids for the first time again? And what did that mean to you?
Well, that's all that I thought about. That's all I cared about. That's the only reason I wanted to get out of prison, because nothing else really mattered anymore. I lost everything. I just wanted to maintain my family and keep my kids. And I was scared of what could happen with my kids with their father in prison, right? Yeah. Which is why we had phone calls 3 times a day, which is why they're up visiting me all the time. And the Department of Corrections, I'm going to tell you, it was weird. They went out of their way to give me time with my family. They gave me the conference room to meet with my family on holidays. I mean, it was, again, humanity on the other side, right? But all I wanted to do was get home to my wife and kids and get back to my family and get things on track. And we had done really well. My wife did an exceptional job. My kids were thriving. It was weird. It was hard, but we made it. But when I got there, my community corrections officer, the prosecutor, called him and asked him to be a little more stringent on me. So they tried to make it really difficult for me. They made it very hard for me to work. They didn't want me to have, I got offered a great opportunity. They wouldn't let me take it. So it was awkward. It was odd for a while, but I was with my family, and that's all that I cared about, man. And that's all they cared about. So having us back together, we just knew everything was going to be okay. It's hard. I mean, I don't know what else I had friends while I was incarcerated that died from cancer. I had one guy came to me who went through cancer, and he apologized to me for what I went through. I said, listen, you don't need to apologize. I'm pretty good at that. Right? I go, you don't need to apologize to me. I said, at least I knew I was going home. I said, I would feel bad. You had it hard. You have it harder than me. Cancer could kill you. Yeah. So we all have different challenges, but we have to be mindful of one another. And our society a lot of time thrives on seeing people suffer or do worse than you because it makes you feel better. Yeah. And, as a community, I just want to see people help each other and work together. We can all do better together and helping. If you are happy, I'm happy. Look, if there's a bunch of happy people running around, this would be a great place, Yeah. So why would we want people to be unhappy? Why don't we help each other? And that's what our goal is here. And I know through Unincarcerated is to help people get a step up to being successful in their life and being a great part of our community, Yeah.
Lift each other up.
Keeping families together.
Yeah.
Just creating a better community. That's all I want to do. It's changed from wanting nice cars and nice houses. It's gotten me to a person that really just wants to help people do better. Of course, I want to take care of my family, but it's great, to be out there and just to see people thrive like Spencer. I mean, and Jason and Milo, they're all just doing so remarkably well. It makes my day. It puts a smile on my face.
Unincarcerated, the podcast, is a joint production of Unincarcerated Productions and Grindle Industries. All of the music on today's episode, including what you're listening to now, is from the artist Speculation. You can learn more about Spec at speculation.bandcamp.com. That's SPEKULATION.bandcamp.com. We will see you all next time.